to go ahead first with our program. I'd like to introduce Nola Benjamin Lawther. She's a graduate of Brunswick High School who earned her bachelor and master's degrees in nursing from the University of Cincinnati. Her PhD, and whatever you see, is in educational psychology. She worked over 50 years as a nurse practitioner and in academics at the University of Cincinnati Colleges of Medicine, Nursing, Kent State University, and University of Akron. Her parents were among my favorite people. I could call them whenever I had a question about something that had happened in the past, and they always knew something about it and could lead me in the right direction. Nola's a mother of twins. We're here, Chad and Chrissy. Chad has a master's degree in library science and works for PCs for People, bringing broadband to underserved areas, and he just told me they're pretty well done in East Cleveland, which is wonderful because those poor kids didn't have any internet access. Chrissy's a nurse at the Cleveland Clinic and is completing her master's work to become a psychiatric nurse practitioners. Chad and Chrissy are trying to arrange work schedules to be here, and they did, and I see you have some other family members here too. So if you would like to introduce them, that would be great. Nola?
Oh, yeah. Hey, we could have Thanksgiving dinner here. Is there anybody that isn't a Benjamin here?
They don't point that.
Okay, I'm going to point it out.
No, don't.
Oh, I'm sorry, not in the eyes. My daughter, Chrissy, her brother, Chad. Back here, I might as well just walk to him. We have Fran Benjamin, who's my sister-in-law, and she is Clayton's wife. And then there's Macy Kuhar, she's a Benjamin. This is Michelle Benjamin here, Clayton's daughter, who you see on the slide is the last Benjamin. And this is her daughter, Macy, who, Macy is a nurse at Ohio State. Got a lot, if anybody wants to have a medical problem tonight, we can handle it. This is Mark.
Carl's raising his hand.
Could you speak up just a little bit?
Sure. This is Mark Kuhar, who is Michelle's husband. And note that she has a different name than him, Benjamin, and that was a controversy in the 80s when they got married. Over here we have Eliza. Eliza Lawther is Chrissy's daughter, and Eliza is named after a very famous Benjamin, Eliza Benjamin, and she took over her name. We have an honorary Benjamin with her, Maya. Is that?
She's an honorary Benjamin.
No. Who's behind that? Oh,
Another nurse.
Sue Hudson. Sue White. Anybody pregnant? Want to be pregnant? Sue Hudson, honorary Benjamin. All right. So, let's see if this works. Okay.
Tell us the title of it.
What?
The title of it.
The title of this? Brunswick Benjamins?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Standing on the shoulders of great people.
Oh yeah, standing on the shoulders of great people, sure like that. Benjamin was great people. Talk louder? Okay. The Brunswick Benjamins. Okay. In the early 1600s, where is this? There. The Benjamins and the females that they married into were the Doties and the Hopkins along the way. They were from the Mayflower, not the Benjamins, but the folks they picked up along the way. And they came to the country because things were better and they were freer over here. And they came with little and they survived a lot of hardship. Some of them fought in every Revolutionary War. The wars like the King's War, the French and Indian War, and the Revolution and the War of 1812, those were all part of the Revolutionary War. And the Benjamins, fought in every war. My line of Benjamins survived. They were They were hurt, they were wounded, but they all survived. In the 1700s, members of my group, the Lyells, were added from Ireland. It was pretty much English folks before then. And then we added some Irish folks. And then in the 1800s, a group from Germany, the Gettlers, joined. All work to serve the community, to make it better. Everybody's pretty middle management, you know, no kings or lords or anything. So they built farms and homesteads from nothing, but whatever was there on the land, just like they did in Brunswick. And I'm really honored to be part of this group and share their story. So my interest in genealogy. In my childhood, growing up in Brunswick, in the basically 50s and 60s on the farm, all I heard about was the history of the Benjamins. Everything was the history of the Benjamins. Not my mother's family, not, you know, the other Benjamin families. It was all about the Benjamins and the men. And so later, you know, I always had these stories going. My grandparents' house, all the Benjamins were hanging in ornate frames around the house. Everything in that house was an artifact. And, you know, it's kind of overwhelming. But the message was, you revere your ancestors, and that's it. So I pretty much got out of town, forgot about all that. And then in 1994, both of my parents, Elmer and Theodora, which some of you know, they died. And I was up here, you know, helping my brother and Fran get things wound up. Fran takes me into the garage at her house. There were 30 boxes of stuff. And she says, either you're taking it or it's going to the curb. And I looked at that mound of stuff. What? And I mean, I lived in Cincinnati, and I was like, what? And I was like, oh my God, I don't want that stuff. And I was thinking, you know, that would be like ancestry malpractice. And I thought, I'm going to take it. So I dialed up my good childhood friend, Connie Daner, and some of you may know the Dainers. And she and Jim, her husband, they always had trucks and stuff. And I said, you know, can you haul this stuff to Cincinnati for me? And sure, so they put it in my basement in Cincinnati. And I looked at it, and it was stuff from both sides, my mother's side and my father's side, and it was all mixed up. And I was like, oh my God, I don't even, you know, I don't know. So anyway, went to my basement, and it sat there. And then a few years later, they loaded it up and brought it back to Medina. Okay, in 1996, we went on a trip out west, and it was one of these organized things where they stopped at various places. And the one place they stopped was Salt Lake City. And so I don't know if you've ever been there, not a lot to do, but there was the Mormon Tabernacle Church, and then there was this genealogy library. I thought, boy, I better go there. And so, you know, I asked, like, Chad and Chrissy, they wanted to go to the movies. So I went to the Mormon library, and they give you a 20-minute introduction on how they've collected records everywhere in the world. Cemeteries, churches, I mean, they just went out and they did a lot of work. And then I was like, well, why did you do that? And are there any Mormons here? Okay. It's kind of weird why they do that. I mean, everybody becomes a Mormon and is saved. Okay. So the next part of the presentation is you go into this room where there's like counters and no chairs, no stools, counters with these old dinosaur computers on them. And so you could have 20 minutes to look up anything on this computer. And then there was a sign that said 20 minutes, and then there was a sign that says, if you want to print anything, it's $1 a page. Okay. And so I was like, okay. So I was there, I mean, I know nothing. I mean, whatever oral history that was pounded into my head all those years, I knew there was Daniel and Eliza. Maybe I knew his father's name. I knew my parents' name, and I knew my grandparents, but I had no idea. I didn't have any dates. I was like, and I put stuff in, nothing. This guy comes up, this old man. He was a volunteer, and he said, "How you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm about to go. I'm not getting anywhere." "Don't you have any dates?" Yeah. I put in all the dates, like my grandfather's birthday and stuff, and nothing. And he says, "Don't you have any marriage dates?" And I remember at my parents' 50th wedding anniversary party, my mother just offhand said to me, "Daniel and Eliza Benjamin were married exactly 100 years before us." And they were married January 19th, 1936. And so I was like, January 19th, 1836, Daniel Benjamin, Eliza Benjamin, put it in. It was like I was at the casino and it was a jackpot. I mean, it just kept going. You know how these little ancestry boxes, family trees go. Going and going and going and going. And this man, who was helping me, says, "Can I get you a stool?" And I said, "Yes." And so then he says, "I have volunteered here 20 years. I've never seen anything like this." And so then people start to gather around, like I know how it is to win a little jackpot at the casino, and that's the way it was. People were gathering around. I've never seen anything like this. And so this goes to 1200 in England, the Benjamin family, from that date. And it was like, and so then the guy says, I've been there for a long time, he says, "Would you like to print this out?" And I was looking at $1 a page. And he said, "It's on the house."
You just entertained all those people.
It was 50 pages. And so, anyway, I don't know what happens before 1200. Isn't that like the Middle Ages and stuff? I don't know. But anyway, they had. And so I walk out of there with 50 pages. I go back to the hotel. There's Chan and Chrissy, and I'm showing them that, and they're like, "Really?" And so then I came home, and I showed Clayton. Clayton was like, "Oh yeah?" I filed my 50 pages under ancestors, and that was it. Okay, so that was pretty much it. Now we move forward to 2009. Chad, my son, moved to Albany, New York. And about the same time that I was coming into my golden years in nursing, and so I'm right there. Anyway, I started looking into those boxes that are now up to in my garage because I don't have a basement. And so one thing I found was this. Is Sandy here, the MS? Yes, not. Okay. She said she transferred this to me. I was looking at this. This is Eliza Benjamin's diary from the 1800s. Wow. And I thought, okay. So I was thumbing through that. And she grew up in Columbia County, New York. Not where I had been told my whole life they came from Jamestown. Columbia County, New York. I thought, interesting. And interestingly, her husband, Daniel Benjamin, also came from Columbia County, New York, and his family. And so I thought, where's that? So I looked it up. It's right by Albany. It's like 30 minutes from Albany. And so I began to, I decided at that point that I needed to join Ancestry.com because I didn't know where I was going with this. So I did. Good money to spend. And so then when we go see Chad, we go down to Columbia County, New York, which is exactly the same as it was in the 1700s and 1800s when my family lived there. Exactly the same. And so the farm where they were, all the buildings, the houses, it's all there. And it's really interesting. I think there's some kind of spiritual message that they're giving us here about it. Here's a little book somebody wrote in 1911 on the Benjamin families of Columbia County, New York. Here's map of Columbia County, New York, if you want to look at. And it's right on the Massachusetts border. So anyway, that's how I got into this, and I'm deep in it still. You can never be done with it. Okay. This is Elmer Benjamin and Theora Lytle Benjamin. And they got married on this day in January 19th, 1936. This is her, this is him. This is Myron Chidsey, by the way. Any Chidseys here?
Next week.
Next week the Chidseys come. No, next month the Chidseys come. Okay, so,
Is that Helen with it?
what?
Was that Helen as well?
No, she came later. Okay, so this is Elmer and Theora on their 50th wedding anniversary. And you know how that date's important. So the Benjamin line is pretty easy to trace thanks to all these stringent record keepers. People in the old days, I don't know if you've ever done genealogical research, but you go to all these libraries, they got the records. I mean, they kept really good records. The churches, they kept records about marriage and death and wills. I mean, you could see what your ancestors, how they gave away, cows and pigs and stuff. And on migration across the country and military records. The problem is it's all under the man's name. It's kind of hard to tease the women out. All the census records are men. And, for a long time, they were the ones that owned the land. And so a lot of it's men. And so maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. The Benjamin Family in America is a book. Actually, here it is. This is the 1977 version. It was reprinted by but not updated. So if anybody wants to update the Benjamins from 1977, you got a job. This is Clayton Benjamin, famous Benjamins. He was sort of a Cleveland Indian. He was like the world's biggest fan of Cleveland Indians. Went to fantasy camp 3 times, and this is him in his fantasy camp. This is my brother, and he died last year, and that was a big loss. This is the last Benjamin. She's here. Put up your hand. There. Michelle Benjamin. Seen here in wearing her last of the Benjamin's coats around town. She works for the Cleveland Clinic. She's a psychiatric nurse practitioner, which is a genetic thing, you see. And so anyway, I told you the story. When she got married, I'm staying a Benjamin. And that was, I think, Sam, didn't you put that in the paper? That was you.
Like her Facebook name.
Okay, so on Ancestry.com, our group has a very clear straight line back to 1200. But we're going to stop at 1632 when they came to Boston. And we're only going to do 4 centuries. Okay, here's a screenshot of, for some reason, this doesn't work. So, this is a screenshot of Ancestry.com that's going to show this is Nola. Then it goes to Elmer, my father, Clifford, my grandfather, Edgar, his father, Daniel Benjamin, Martin Benjamin, Ebenezer Benjamin, Obadiah Benjamin, Joseph Benjamin, and John Benjamin. And John Benjamin came over here in 1632. So, all the records are about men and their surnames, and that's, you know, the way it was. Women preserved a lot of the archive stuff, just like Nola and her 30 boxes. So, let's take a look at some of these women who intermingled with these Benjamin men. Okay. Some interminglers. Here's Theora, my mom. And she was, her mom was a Doty. And so we look at these folks, Doty, Edward Doty, came on the Mayflower, signed the Mayflower Compact. Here's some more of my mother and the Dotys and the Sperrys and the Hopkins. And we look at these people, follow these Hopkins through to Stephen Hopkins, also came on the Mayflower. What's interesting is that Edward Doty was Stephen Hopkins' not slave, apprentice. And that's not how this happened. I mean, this happened that they intermingled like hundreds of years later. Okay, another woman, my mother's line again, Lytles. This is where these Irish folks were mixed in, and we go back and follow these Lytles back, and they go back to the 1600s coming over. And then we have Mary Chidsey. Mary Chidsey married a Benjamin, and you know the Chidsey line goes back, but I'm going to talk about her mom's line, the Greenwood line, instead of the Chidsey line. And so, you know, they go back. So you can see, whoops, Chad, how do I get back?
Try the left arrow.
Right?
Try the left arrow.
On the keyboard, back arrow.
Oh.
There you go.
Boy, it's always good to have a guru. Okay. Daniel and Eliza came over from Columbia County, New York. Here's Eliza. She was a Holbert, and to just show, you know, she had ancestors too. All right, so John Benjamin came in 1632, and he came to Boston, and here's a bunch of genealogical references. After graduating Cambridge University in England, he became intimate, which I think in those days meant friends, with John Winthrop. John Winthrop was the governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, and that friendship got John Benjamin to come to Boston in 1632 on the ship Lion. Actually, there's some other references. They went to school together, college together in England. Here is Watertown, Massachusetts, where John, his house burned down when he came over to Boston. He got land. He could have a pick of the land because his buddy was like president. And so he got some land at Harvard University in Shadowland. But he had this house that burned down. So anyway, he moved over to Watertown. And so this is when you go to Watertown, there's this welcoming thing, and then they got John's name in there. So, when you look at the ancestry thing, I tried to put some kind of a, revolution picture on the folks that, were in that, which is a lot of them. And it's like so many of these people fought in the Revolution. If you want to be related to a person who was in the Revolution, all they had to do was live there, because this is where they lived. And so that's what they did. They farmed and then they fought. And so, there were many, many people from the Benjamin line and from the folks they intermarried that were in the Revolutionary War. Lots of them. I mean, I have at least 17 direct ancestors who fought in the Revolution. And that's because they came from there. So these people would they would join a militia and they would fight for, a few months. Then they'd go home and tend their crops and, go back and fight some more. So they had a lot of kids and they didn't live all that long. So how about these Benjamins that came to Brunswick? We just look at them. Nola, Elmer, Clifford, my grandfather, Edgar, his father, Daniel, and his wife Eliza, and Martin and Anna. These are the people, these four came from Columbia County, New York, and then produced all the rest of us after they got there. So, in 1836, Martin, Anna, Daniel, Eliza came from Columbia County, New York, began a covered wagon on the Erie Canal. They came separately, though. Okay, here's a representation of the Conestoga wagon they came on. There's the wagon. These people look really happy that they were sitting down here. And so notice the ox and the ox yoke there that held those ox together and bringing the wagon over. Here is the route they followed on the Erie Canal. The Erie Canal had been built a couple years before, and so it made the trip easier. It took about 7 to 14 days versus, all summer to get here. So they came from Columbia County here, they got on and they floated essentially over here, got off in Buffalo, and then they drove their wagon over to Brunswick. And here's one of two existing ox yokes. The other one's above Fran's fireplace in the dining. But this is my fireplace, and this is the actual ox yoke that was used to drag them here. This is where Martin and Anna live at Venice Corner Cemetery now, and this is their headstone. So Martin Benjamin fought in the War of 1812. He's buried at Venice Corners. He gets a little flag every Memorial Day. And he married Anna Katie Lovejoy Babcock. We were related to the Babcocks, and I never knew that. They live next door to us. Makes sense. I mean, if you know where Babcock Road is, it's right at the Hinkley side. Okay, so she was the aunt of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who was a suffragist. She and Susan B. Anthony made it happen for women to get the vote, although they never lived to see it happen later. So here's an article about her. So I'm proud to have her in my group. So Anna Babcock, who was a Katie, she married William Babcock, and they had 8 kids by the time she was 30. And that's just the way it happened. And then he was killed in the war, and she was at loose ends with these 8 kids. So she was like Martin Benjamin married her and raised her 8 kids, plus they had 3 of their own. So in 1833, Justice, who was he was near in age to Daniel, his brother, Justice packed up his family, and this is before the Erie Canal, and they came over and bought land and settled in Brunswick. And so they were so happy to do this that they told Martin and Daniel to come over on horseback and check it out. You could get cheap, good farmland. And so they did, and they bought 220 acres at $1.50 an acre. So they bought it from the Connecticut Land Company of the Western Reserve. And this was a big deal back then because the King of England, he sort of like, you know, still said this is who gets this money and land and this is who gets that. So there was this, you know, we got it from the Indians, so they had all those treaties taken care of. So now the King of England said to the Massachusetts colony, you can have that land out there, but you got to develop it quickly because we want these people moving out there and spreading across the country. And so these people from Connecticut bought up this land, these wealthy people, including Moses Cleveland, and they had it surveyed, and they figured out this great, the hub of it would be Cleveland, and so then they parceled it out and they started selling it. And that's who my family bought it from. This is Daniel and Eliza. Remember where there was Martin and Anna, his parents, and then there was Daniel and Eliza, and they came from Columbia County in a wagon, and they live at Dennis Corners Cemetery now. This is Daniel, son of Martin and Anna. He was born in Columbia County. He died here in 1868. He was in his 50s. I don't know why he died. So yeah. This is Eliza, and she was newly married at age 17 when she came here, and that's quite a honeymoon she had. And actually, she wasn't 17 there. She was 19. Yeah. It was a hard life. Okay, I got this pin. It's not worth anything, but I got it. It's right here. You can come up and look at it.
The one that she's wearing.
Oh my goodness.
It's worth a lot to me. Oh, I got to show you. We have a new Eliza in our family. You met her. Eliza the blonde over here. This is Eliza's spoon. This spoon is 200 years old. Anyway, this belongs to that Eliza now. This is Eliza. You can't see what this is. Okay. So anyway, you know, they settled and they had kids. We all lived on the farm, and everybody did that until in 1965, Clayton, well, he had been married for a while, but he moved off the land and moved to Medina in France, and I moved to Cincinnati then to go to college. So that was the end of that.
How many generations were here? Was it 6?
Martin, Daniel, Edgar, Cliff, Elmer, Clayton, and Nola.
6.
Yeah. Okay, so Daniel and Eliza had 8 kids. There was their oldest kid, John. He was not included in the oral history. Nobody knew about John. And so he was 10 years old when he died. And then in the 70s, my dad, if anybody knew Elmer was a straight arrow, black and white, you know. The neighbor, my grandfather built these houses up there north on 130th, there's 3 of them, and he rented them out and sold them there in front of Benjamin Farms. And so the neighbor that lived in one of the houses came to my father in the 70s and said, there's a little boy ghost named John, he's 10 years old and he's visiting me every night.
He told me that.
And my father freaked. And so my mother who my mother had quite a sense of humor. Anyway, she thought it was hilarious. And so we came up to visit, you know, and she says, ask your father what Mrs. Longo told him. And so I did. I mean, he freaked out. He says, I don't know how she knew that. I don't know, she's been doing research. I don't know how she knew that. But this kid told him, described the whole log cabin and the area around, and, you know, stuff that was, he described the spring water that was there. So, anyway, pretty funny. John actually is buried in Bennett's Corners. Sally married Byron Sherman from Sherman's Corners. He became a physician and they moved to Iowa. Sophie married Charles Clement and they were farmers. Ellen married William James. He was a Civil War officer. They moved to Brea. Egbert married Addie Bennett. Listen to this one. And from Bennett's Corners. And he died young. They had 3 kids. And then she took over their business, which was a store. Ada married some guy named Everts. They moved to Portland. And Edgar married Mary Chitsey, ta-da, our line. And then Irving, one more, married Anna Allen. He was a grocer in Cleveland. So here's some of them. This is Sally, married Byron Sherman. That's the house at Sherman's Corners. Anybody that grew up around here, it remembers that house. It's where Sheets and TVs is now. This is Clement, Sophie, married Clement. Clement's everywhere. And this is Ellen. She married the guy in the Civil War. And here, these are Representative Simpsons in Medina County in 1894. And notice they're all men, except 2 women. Eddie Bennett Benjamin, and her daughter, who ran the store at Bennett's Corners, made a big success out of it. They were also the postmaster. And Addie went for the first telephone lines in 1902 or 6 or something. She was the telephone operator. So she was like quite a representative citizen. Okay, this is Irving. Felt like he should have something. This is Michelle found this. This is from his store in Brooklyn. It's a bill of sale from 1905. Okay, my line is Edgar. Here's Edgar. Here's Mary Chizzy. This is about 1886. This is my grandfather Cliff, right there. Okay, this is just to show you, this is that map that is floating around somewhere. This is just to show you how everybody married their neighbors.
Nobody else around.
This is Daniel Benjamin's land here. Here's the Clements. Here's the Bennetts. Here's the Shermans. Over here, well, the Babcocks are on the other side of the street. And then over here's the Chidseys. So, you know, they didn't go far. This is maybe 1874. This is the farm. Residence of Eliza Benjamin and the late D.L. Benjamin at that time. And, you know, the barn got bigger and the house still there. This is my grandparents, Clara. She was a Geckler. We brought the Germans in. And Cliff, infamous guy. If you were around Brunswick in the days.
Why?
Why?
Why was he infamous?
Well, he was quite a guy. My father was nothing like him, neither was Clayton or me. But he was a Jekyll and Hyde. In retrospect, you know, being in psych business, I'm sure he was bipolar. I'm absolutely sure. He was like the head of the school board, the head of the Grange, and one of the heads of the fire department, and God knows what, all at once. He used to wear these bib overalls, had a giant wad of money he'd carry around. And he'd go to these auctions. Oh, I love to go with him. And I used this skill today at garage sales. And he just was a wheeler and dealer. He was awesome. And he was a wild guy. This is a farm, maybe about 1954. The barn, the silo, tool shed where I grew up. The middle house is not there. The farmhouse is over here. The newer chicken house, the hog pen. This was where the baby chickens were brought in the brooder house. This was the brooder house. Then when they got older, they went to the pullet house. Then bad chickens lived back here that pecked each other, and occasionally there'd be a rooster that lived back here. And then this was for the chickens when they got big enough to be good chickens and lay eggs. It was called Brookbank Farm. It was a dairy farm until 1957. Then it became a poultry and beef cattle farm until 1964. And Cliff sold off most of the land in 1958 because he didn't want to go to the poorhouse. And so the interesting thing is that the people he sold it to, they went bankrupt twice. And so it really didn't get sold off until the 70s. But, you know, by that time, the barn door had closed on farming. And the people who bought it really didn't develop it until the 90s. So it just sort of, you know, laid there like the farm for all those years. This is what it is now, most of it. Park Place and Benjamin Farms, and developed by Pulte, and all the streets are named after us. And then there's part of the industrial park west and stuff is in the back. And this is just from the tax survey. I want to mention this house is for rent, 912, if anybody just remodeled by Chad. Okay, this is a farmhouse. It was completed in 1850. It took 2 years, and it was done by Martin and Daniel, and they brought over two of the Katie cousins from New York to do it. And all the materials, like the wood, was, you know, sawed down, and they took it to Brooks Sawmill and its corners, and it may be a different color now, I think it is. And anyway, it's owned. My grandfather sold it in early 60s, and it's now James Williams, who was a Brunswick detective, lives there.
They just recently remodeled, didn't
They remodeled it when they first started moving in back in the 80s.
they? Well, I think they just did it again.
Oh, they just did it in? Oh,
A
okay.
couple of years ago.
It's, there was a lot of things to remodel in there, for sure. Okay, who are the Benjamins? Hard workers, farm work ethic, community servants. Cliff, you know, he belonged to everything. We had a sense of humor, which I think got us through a lot. Strong faith. Elmer was Mr. Benjamin in the law at Grange, charter member of the Brunswick Kiwanis, 4-H advisor, president of the Medina County Fair Board, and in local politics. Clayton, Medina Kiwanis, Medina Y, local politics. I don't know what else, but he was out there. The women, you know, they backed up the men. Okay, and, you know, I got the bug too, a lot of community service, Cincinnati. All right, transitions in society. Industrialization, the farming really changed. And it changed over the time that I was involved. And it just, things became more automated. You talk about electricity. One of the first incandescent light bulbs in Brunswick. And this was passed down. My father made me promise I would always keep it safe. So keep it in a low basket. Okay, one thing we did get out of this, changing in society, was we got more customers. So we could sell more of this stuff. That means we had to grow more. And they didn't need all the kids. My father was an only child. He only had 2 kids. I mean, we started paring it down. So who was left to run this farm? Clayton. Clayton, you know, he got married early, went for a business degree. And Nola, I and my mother made it a point, although I did do the obligatory 8 years of 4-H, and that I not gain those skills. I didn't have them. I mean, it was easy, but it was, you know, she was not going to have me stay around on the farm. So we got out of dairy farming in 1957. Took a lot of money. You had to pay a lot of money to upgrade, and there were people who checked. And so we couldn't afford that, so we got out. And we went into what was called automated chicken farming. It was not. The only thing automated about this chicken farm was it had like a thing that pulled the manure out and blew it in the manure spreader. Other than that, there was no automation at all. So anyway, we had all these chickens, and we had what we had. So by 1964, you know, I was the only one left. I mean, my parents and my mother was disabled, and it was like, you know, come on. And so sold off all that stuff, and Elmer went to work for Nationwide Insurance, which was a good move. All right, here's our church in the old days. And so Edgar, Mary, Cliff, Clara, Elmer, Theodora, Clayton, Fran, Michelle, and Nola, all were active members in this church. That's the Brunswick United Methodist Church. If you don't recognize it, it's had a few uplifts since then. Martin and Anna, Daniel and Eliza went to Venice Corners Church, and there was a conflict that I knew nothing about.
There's a window there for one of you, right?
From the German guy, Geckler's, from my grandmother's father, J.F. Geckler, you know, stained glass window.
Any comments?
All right. Day in the life of farming as I remember, in the 50s and 60s. Pretty much this sums it up. Work. Cows were milked twice a day. Cow areas in the barn were cleaned and shoveled the manure out and fed. The silage was obtained from the silo, which was gross. And milk was put in the milk cans, put in the cooler in the milk house. Then every morning it had to be put in the milk stand. So the guy came by and picked it up. The other animals were fed. Stalls cleaned, horses, pigs, sheep, pigs, and chickens. Crops had to be planted and tended and harvested. The machinery had to be repaired and ready. Crops for animal and family consumption. Tended to the surplus we sold at a produce stand on the farm out by the road, which I operated from the time I was 8 years old. In the winter, people had to come inside and get their stuff. And there was an egg produce route 2 days a week in Cleveland. And so guess what Nola did every summer? And on vacation, let's go in that route. So, women, they picked the produce, they pasteurized the milk, they made the butter, the cheese, prepared the meals during the seasons of harvest. We had hired hands. Everybody ate at my grandmother's table. The women cooked the stuff, except Nola tried to get out of it. And, all right, making your own clothes. All right, every spring when the feed bag truck would drive in, some of you can relate to this. The feed bags came in these ugly flowered prints. And this was my wardrobe. And so I got to, okay, my grandma, my German grandma, had an apron, my mother had a pinafore, and Nola had a dress. All out of the same attractive flower. And I'll tell you, at church, I had a church dress. I didn't have to wear that. But when you go out every once in a while, you look around, other girls aren't wearing it. And so I remember when it was time for me to go to first grade, I said to my mom, there is no way I am wearing feed bag gloves. Ever. And she got the message. Okay. So anyway, the women basically did the peripheral animals, like the chickens, the pigs, the sheep. And except for Theora, my mother, she was involved in everything. She was out there with the men on the line, doing this stuff. In the spring, we gathered maple syrup. Oh yes, the big horses on the wagon, drove through the woods, put the taps in, put the buckets on, and went back. My grandfather ran the sugar shack down by the creek, and it was like this big vat that just bubbled, and there was a big fire under it, and I was real little, so it probably wasn't that big, but anyway, it was scary. Okay, this is what we did for relaxation. On Sunday after church and a meal, we went for a ride around Medina County to look at other people's crops. Boy, was that fun. And then we drive out by the Medina County home, and my grandfather would say, if we all work harder, I'm going to be living there. Okay. This is my mom, and I gotta say a word about my mom. My mom she was like an original feminist in Medina County. She was from Granger. She grew up at a farm. And anyway, she was widely read. She didn't go to college. She was widely read though. And she just had a very progressive idea about what women should do. And she was quiet about it, but she got her message through. And she made it so clear that her son was not going to be a farmer. And she made it so clear that her daughter was not going to be a farm wife. And thank her. She wrote this book, Medina County History of Medina. She wrote the chapter in this on Brunswick in 1948. Anna Root wrote the introduction, but she actually wrote this chapter. So read it, very interesting. They're on sale in the back. So, that's all I have.
No. There's a story. The story about the clock. You got to tell the story about the clock.
Fran, did you bring a clock? No. All right. Daniel and Eliza threw this clock in the wagon when they came from Columbia County, and Clayton got the clock, and Fran's got the clock somewhere. And so this clock had a perch. Remember I told you, I spent a lot of time in my grandparents' house when I was growing up. It was like a museum with all this stuff around. This clock had a perch in there, and it was at 1 o'clock. Didn't move. And so, as the story goes, and they love to tell it, Eliza died upstairs at 1 a.m. and that clock stopped at 1 a.m.
And never worked again.
Never worked again. Well, the Clayton and Fran got working. I think it was now. But it's like, and then I took a nap in that room, when I was little, and I could look at that clock like, oh my God, So, there were so many old things around there when I was growing up that, it took me a long time to appreciate it in retrospect. I I was sort of like horrified by all this stuff back then.
How about any other questions and answers? Questions from the crowd?
I have a quick question. Was there a trustee Lytle in your family?
Tressie, yeah,
Okay.
Tressie and Howard, Howard and Tressie, brother and sister, was his
I
name?
know, I just remember my aunt talking about trustee quite a bit.
They were my mother's cousins or something. They lived down there on the Town Line Road to the left before the Peebles house, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. There was a connection.
You mentioned the Katie's coming with your great-great-grandfather from,
They
were they
came,
all related to you?
well, the Katie's, Martin's wife was Katie. Martin Benjamin, Daniel's father.
My family way back then was Katie's
Oh, okay.
also.
See?
And also Hopkins.
Oh my God.
Constance Hopkins on the Mayflower.
I hate to say this, we're
My
all
ninth
related.
great-grandmother.
Oh my God. So, see, everybody's just related once we.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right, well, you mentioned Clemens, so I guess we
Right. We can't get away from that. Yeah, the Katie's, Katie's came, I know some of them spread up there by North Royalton and Strong South Katie Road or whatever. And then some of them went down county and proliferated down there. But more Katie's came after. The two Katie's came to help build the house, is my understanding. And then they got more Katie's to come over.
And different than your line, my line from the Mayflower was all women till my grandfather.
Oh, wow.
All women.
Wow, that's amazing.
Okay,
Now look, wasn't Josephine Zimmerman your aunt?
Yes,
She's your mother's sister?
sister, yes. My mother's sister was Aunt Jo Zimmerman, married Carl Zimmerman, Fire Chief Carl Zimmerman. Yes,
in the store.
yes, had the store.
Yes.
that's the one thing most people who came here later on remember is Zimmerman's store.
Yes. Actually, that's where my parents met, is when he was going to church, she went to the Granger Church still, but she was working at the Zimmerman store, and he came in there after church.
Cool.
I just have to tell you, when we were kids, we used to go trick-or-treating at your house. We lived down the street, Bucer's our last name, across from that blue house, we went trick-or-treating at your blue house.
At the farmhouse?
Yep.
When you
We
were a
only
kid?
went to 3 houses, because we didn't have it in the neighborhood.
Right. I can tell you it wasn't when my grandparents lived there because they didn't believe in trick or treating.
She used to give us cookies and stuff.
Nice people were good.
Okay, so how about if we take a 15-minute break? We want to look at the pictures and things, and then we'll start our business meeting. Thank you.